He was one of the most powerful men in the country. He had built an empire from nothing, a billion-dollar company, a penthouse that touched the clouds, a name that made boardrooms go silent the moment he walked in. And then, in one single moment, everything went dark. Not metaphorically, not financially, literally. He woke up one morning and he could not see. And in that moment of total darkness, total vulnerability, total fear, the one person who had promised to love him in sickness and in health walked into that hospital room, looked at him sitting there helpless and broken, and laughed. That laugh, cold, sharp, dismissive, like he was already nothing. His name was Marcus Hale, and by the time this story was over, she would be the one left in the dark. But before we get to the revenge, before we get to the courtroom, before we get to the moment Marcus stood up in front of 500 people and said the 6 words that destroyed her entire world, there is something you need to understand. Marcus didn't just lose his sight that day. He lost his best friend, his partner, the woman he had spent 11 years building a life with. Or at least the woman he thought she was. Because what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't see even before the accident, was that his wife, Victoria Hale, had already checked out of their marriage long before the lights went out. And while Marcus was fighting to survive in that hospital bed, Victoria was sending texts, making calls, moving money. And the only person who saw all of it was a 24-year-old intern named Zoe Adeyemi, who had only been at Hale Industries for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That's all it took for Zoe to see what Victoria had been hiding for 3 years. Because what happened next would change all 3 of their lives forever. Now, let's begin the story. Marcus Hale did not grow up wealthy. He grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit, Michigan, with a mother who worked double shifts at a diner and a father he never met. What he had was a mind like a machine. By 19, he had taught himself to code. By 22, he had built his first software product from a second-hand laptop in his childhood bedroom. By 28, he had sold that company for $12 million. He was just getting started. Over the next decade, Marcus built Hale Industries, a tech and real estate conglomerate that eventually spanned 4 countries and employed over 3,000 people. He was driven, relentless, brilliant. But Marcus had one blind spot, and her name was Victoria. He met Victoria Chambers at a charity gala in Chicago when he was 31. She was everything that Marcus, in his rough-around-the-edges, self-made way, had never experienced. Elegant, polished, magnetic. She laughed at his jokes. She asked him real questions. She looked at him like he was the only man in the room. Marcus, a man who had conquered boardrooms and financial markets, was completely disarmed. They were married 14 months later. It was, by every outward appearance, a fairy tale. The penthouse, the vacations, the magazine covers. Power Couple of the Year, one headline read. Marcus framed it and hung it in his office. Victoria, as it would later turn out, had already started the affair by the time that issue went to print. It was a Tuesday in November. Marcus had been working late, as he always did. He was wrapping up a major acquisition deal, the biggest in Hale Industries' history, a $2.3 billion merger that had taken 18 months to negotiate. He was in a good mood, rare for Marcus. He called Victoria from the office at 9:30 that evening. She didn't answer. He assumed she was asleep. He didn't think twice. He got into his car. He started the drive home. A truck ran a red light at the intersection of Meridian and 5th. The impact was on the driver's side. Marcus survived, but the trauma to his head, specifically to the area of his brain that processes visual information, left him with a condition his doctors called cortical blindness. He could open his eyes, he could feel light, but he could see Nothing. The doctors told him there was a chance, a small chance, that his vision could return with time and treatment. The brain, they said, was extraordinary in its ability to heal, but they could not promise anything. Marcus lay in that hospital bed for 6 days, wrapped in bandages and uncertainty, waiting for his wife. She came on day 2, stayed for 40 minutes, said she had a lunch appointment. She came on day 4, stayed for 20 minutes, took a phone call in the hallway and never came back in. She came on day 6, and that was the day everything you heard at the beginning of this story happened. On day 6, Marcus heard the door to his hospital room open. He couldn't see, but he had learned to listen. He recognized the sound of Victoria's heels on the hospital floor, that sharp, precise click. "You're awake," she said. "Victoria," Marcus said, "I've been trying to reach you." There was a pause. Then, and Marcus would later describe this as the moment he felt his heart physically break, he heard it. A laugh. Not a laugh of joy, not a laugh of relief. A short, cold, cruel laugh. "Marcus," she said, her voice dropping to something almost bored. "Look at you." "What?" he said. "You can't even look at me," she said. "You can't see anything, can you?" "Victoria, what are you—" "I've been talking to Richard, my lawyer. I've been talking to him for a while, actually." Marcus went very still. "The timing," she continued, "is unfortunate, but honestly, maybe it's better this way. Cleaner." "Are you telling me you're filing for divorce?" Marcus said slowly. "I'm in a hospital bed. I can't see. And you're—" "I'm protecting myself," she said flatly. "You should understand that. You always said business is business." She clicked her heels back toward the door. "I'll have Richard send the papers." And she left. Just the slow beep of the heart monitor filled the room. Marcus sat in the dark, completely alone, completely blind. And for the first time in his life, the great Marcus Hale had absolutely no idea what to do next. There is something most people never knew about Hale Industries. Marcus had a program, a passion project, something deeply personal to him, where he personally selected 3 interns every year from underprivileged backgrounds. Full scholarship, full salary, real work, real mentorship. He called it the Foundation Track. It was inspired by his own story. Zoe Adeyemi was Foundation Track intern number 31. She was 24 years old. She had grown up in Lagos, Nigeria, moved to the United States at 16, put herself through college on 2 jobs in a partial academic scholarship, and had recently graduated with a degree in business analytics. She had been at Hale Industries for exactly 3 weeks when the accident happened. When the news broke internally that Marcus was in hospital, most of the senior executives went into quiet panic mode. Not about Marcus, about themselves, about their positions, about the power vacuum that was forming at the top. Zoe did something different. She walked up to Marcus's assistant, a kind older woman named Dorothy, who had worked for Marcus for 9 years and loved him like a son, and she asked if there was anything she could do to help. Dorothy looked at this young intern for a long moment, and then she said, "Yes, actually, there is." Dorothy had been coordinating Marcus's medical care, his appointments, his correspondence, because Victoria had made it very clear she was not available for such things. Dorothy was 71 years old, and the workload was quietly breaking her. She asked Zoe to step in as a temporary liaison, reading emails to Marcus, taking notes, relaying information, helping him navigate the chaos of running a company from a hospital bed while unable to see a single thing. Zoe said yes without hesitation. The first time she walked into his room, Marcus heard her stop at the door. "Who's there?" he said. His voice was flat, exhausted, guarded. "My name is Zoe Adeyemi. I'm a Foundation Track intern. Dorothy sent me. I'm here to help, if you want me to." A long pause. "Can you read?" Marcus said. "Yes." Can you take notes without being told twice? Yes. Can you keep your mouth shut about everything you hear in this room? Absolutely. Another pause. Then, barely, the edge of something that might have been a smile crossed Marcus's face. Pull up a chair, he said. Every day, Zoe came to the hospital. She read him his emails. She took his calls on speaker. She described documents to him, numbers, clauses, strategies, with a precision and intelligence that Marcus quickly recognized as extraordinary. She wasn't just reading to him. She was analyzing, offering quiet observations, catching things that even his most senior executives had missed. One afternoon, 3 weeks into their arrangement, Zoe paused while reading through a routine financial document. "Marcus," she said carefully, "what is it?" "This transfer, it went out of the Hale Industries operating account 4 days before the accident. The authorization signature is his, but the timestamp reads 2:17 a.m. Silence filled the room. "He never worked at 2:17 a.m., she said. She had been going through his calendar for weeks by then. He was always done by midnight at the latest. Marcus's jaw tightened. "How much?" he said. $800,000. Transferred to an account that doesn't appear anywhere in the company records. Marcus was quiet for a very long time. "Keep looking," he said. What Zoe found over the next 2 weeks was not just one suspicious transfer. It was a pattern. 17 transfers over 14 months, all authorized with Marcus's digital signature, all timestamped in the early hours of the morning, all routed to the same offshore account. Total amount drained from Hale Industries, $4.2 million. But here is where it gets worse. The offshore account was registered under a shell company called Mercer Consulting LLC. And Mercer Consulting LLC had one director, a man named Daniel Voss. Daniel Voss was Victoria's college boyfriend, the same man she had, according to her own social media posts, reconnected with at a conference in Paris 18 months ago. Zoe placed the documents on the bed beside Marcus's hand. "Someone has been stealing from his company," she said quietly. And she believed she knew who. Marcus reached out. His fingers found the edge of the papers. He couldn't read them. He couldn't see them, but he held them tightly. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. Not grief, not devastation, clarity. Here is what Victoria had been doing for over a year. Using her access to Marcus's digital accounts, access he had given her freely, trustingly, because she was his wife, she had been authorizing fraudulent transfers out of Hale Industries' operating funds. The money flowed to Daniel Voss. Daniel used it to fund a real estate venture in Dubai. The plan, investigators would later conclude, was to drain as much as possible before triggering a divorce, leaving Marcus financially weakened, emotionally blindsided, and legally entangled. The accident had simply accelerated her timeline. She had laughed at him in that hospital bed because she believed she had already won. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated Zoe Adeyemi, and she had severely underestimated what Marcus Hale becomes when someone strips everything away from him. Marcus made a decision. He was not going to call the police. Not yet. He was not going to call his lawyers. Not yet. He was going to let Victoria believe she was winning. "She thinks he's broken," Marcus told Zoe one evening, the city lights a faint blur he could barely sense beyond the hospital window. Let her keep thinking that. "What is he planning?" Zoe asked carefully. "The merger," Marcus said. "The $2.3 billion deal. It closes in 6 weeks. Victoria's lawyers are already moving to claim a share of Hale Industries in the divorce settlement. She wants a piece of it." "She wants to cash out," Zoe said slowly. Exactly. So we let her believe she's about to. A pause. And then we pull the floor out from under her. How? Because that merger deal, the one she thinks is her golden ticket, contains a morality clause. If any principal party in Hale Industries is found to have committed financial fraud prior to the closing date, Zoe's eyes went wide. The deal collapses, she whispered. The deal collapses, Marcus confirmed, and every share, every asset, every claim Victoria has filed becomes worthless overnight. He turned his face toward her. He couldn't see her, but he knew she was there. But he needs evidence that will hold up in any court in this country, airtight, unimpeachable. Can she do that? Zoe looked at the towering stack of documents beside her. A long silence. Give him 10 days, she said.
Referenced them with hotel logs and receipts, recovered email threats that had been deleted but never fully scrubbed from the company's server, worked late into the night alongside a forensic accountant that Dorothy quietly arranged through back channels. What Zoe compiled was not just evidence. It was a case file. 147 pages. Every transfer, every timestamp, every thread connecting Victoria to Daniel Voss. Every lie, documented and dated. On the 43rd day of Marcus's hospitalization, something else happened. Something the doctors had called possible, but never promised. Marcus woke up at 6:15 in the morning. And there was light. Not just the sensation of light. Actual light. Shapes. The white of the ceiling. The blue-gray of the early morning sky pressing against the window. Blurry. Fragmented, imperfect, but there. He pressed the call button with trembling hands. The doctors came, then Dorothy, then, because Dorothy called her immediately, Zoe. Zoe walked into that room and found Marcus sitting upright in bed, both eyes open, staring at his own hands as though he was seeing them for the very first time in his life. He looked up the moment she stepped through the door. He had never seen her face before. For a long, quiet moment, he simply looked at her. Zoe, he said. Yes, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. You're younger than he thought, he said. She laughed, and it was the most different laugh from the one at the beginning of the story that you could possibly imagine. Warm, real, flooded with relief. You're exactly what she thought, she said. 3 weeks later, Marcus Hale walked into the annual Hale Industries shareholder meeting. He had told no one that his vision had returned. The room, 500 people, journalists, board members, investors, went absolutely silent the moment he walked in, without a cane, without an assistant, without any of the accommodations that had been quietly arranged for a man who, as far as the entire world knew, was still blind. He walked to the podium. He looked out across the room, and he saw Victoria sitting in the third row in the seat reserved for the CEO's spouse, dressed in a cream blazer, her posture composed, her expression carrying the barely concealed anticipation of a woman who believed she was hours away from the greatest payday of her life. Her lawyers had already filed the paperwork. The merger announcement was scheduled. Everything, from her perspective, was falling perfectly into place. Marcus looked at her for a long, steady moment. She looked back, and for the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty. Marcus leaned into the microphone. Before we begin, he said, there is something that needs to be addressed. He reached into the folder sitting open in front of him. 147 pages, he said, his voice calm and absolute. Would anyone in this room like to guess what is inside them? The room shifted. Bodies leaned forward. Eyes moved. His wife, Marcus said, spent the last 14 months stealing from this company. $4.2 million, transferred to an offshore account belonging to a man named Daniel Voss, with whom she had been conducting an affair. Gasps rippled through the room, chairs scraped, heads turned, Victoria's face drained of all color.
This evidence has been submitted to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, to the company's legal team, and to every member of this board as of this morning. He looked directly at Victoria, held her gaze. The merger will proceed, he said. The divorce will also proceed, but pursuant to the fraud clause in the prenuptial agreement she signed, she will leave this marriage with exactly what she brought into it. A long beat of silence. Nothing. The room erupted. Victoria Hale was arrested 48 hours later. Daniel Voss was arrested in Dubai the following week. The merger closed at $2.3 billion, on schedule, without a single complication, without a single hitch. And Marcus Hale took a week off, the first week off he had allowed himself in 11 years. He called Zoe on the third day of that week. "He's been thinking," Marcus said. "About what?" Zoe said. "The foundation track program. He wants to expand it, double the intake, triple the reach, and he wants someone to run it, someone who truly understands what it means to build something from absolutely nothing." A pause settled between them. "Is he offering her a job?" Zoe said. "He's offering her whatever she wants," Marcus said. And there was something in his voice in that moment, careful, honest, unhurried, and new, that made Zoe go very quiet on the other end of the line. "Let's start with the job," she said finally. "There's a thing people say, that adversity reveals character. That is true, but it is only half the truth. The other half is this: adversity reveals people. The people who laugh when someone falls, the people who quietly disappear when things get difficult, and the people, the rare, extraordinary ones, who pull up a chair in the dark and say, 'I'm here. Tell me what you need.'" Marcus Hale lost his sight on a Tuesday in November. He got it back 43 days later, but what he truly found in the dark, what no accident, no betrayal, no cruel laugh in a cold hospital room could ever take from him, was something he hadn't even known he'd lost: the capacity to trust again. And a woman named Zoe Adeyemi, who had been his eyes, his compass, and his anchor long before he could ever see her face.